I hired a woman to clean the house while everyone in my family was out. An hour later, my phone buzzed and a whisper slid into my ear. "Ma'am, is anyone else supposed to be in the house?" I went cold. "No. Why?" "There's a woman upstairs." My hand shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. "Kaylee, listen to me. Go outside right now. Lock the door. Wait on the porch. I'm calling the police." I hung up, dialed 911, gave our address, and ran for my car with a heart that felt like it was learning how to gallop. Before I dive in, thank you for being here with me. If you're listening, please tap like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're hearing this from. I always love seeing how far a story travels. Now take a breath and come with me to the day everything inside my quiet life turned and faced the light. My name is Nora Bennett. I live in Port Townsend, Washington, a Victorian seaport where fog hangs like a curtain in the mornings and the gulls shout when the ferries roll in. Our house stands on a bluff above the bay, a tall, slate-roofed Queen Anne with a widow's walk and a copper weathercock that complains when the wind changes. People point at it on walking tours and say, "A writer lives there." Which is true if you mean my husband, Graham Whitaker, because for years I would have introduced myself as a school counselor and married to a famous novelist. I would have said it with pride and a little joking apology for the leaning stacks of author copies that lived by our front door. That morning started like any other. Graham had an early meeting on Bainbridge with his editor and left before sunrise in his old Volvo. I had made a list the night before, a long list, written with a dull pencil nub, because I finally had a free Saturday. I was going to deep clean the house, every baseboard, every stair, every pane of glass that the sea air kisses with salt. I had just tied a scarf around my hair when a text chimed from my oldest friend, Ruthie. 3 hours in town only. Coffee at Salty Gull? We'd grown up together in Kitsap County, shared prom dresses and heartbreaks, and somehow become women who had to make plans a month out, until now, this surprise. I wanted to run to her, but there was the house and the rag, and the feeling that it's a shame to waste momentum once you found it. Then I thought of Kaylee Ortiz, the quiet English major who rents a cottage 2 blocks down and cleans houses to pay for books and night classes. I'd met her at a neighborhood yard sale when she bought a box of battered paperbacks with the kind of reverence that makes you believe in literature again. I called. "Kaylee, it's Ms. Bennett. Would you have time today? Just a few hours?" Her voice brightened. "Absolutely. When should I come?" "Now, if you can. The key is tucked in the blue planter by the porch. The house will be empty. Start with the library and the stairs, please, and be extra careful with the old oak shelves in my husband's study. They wobble." "I'll be there in 10 minutes," she said, grateful like only a student who's counting dollars can be. I left cash and a note on the kitchen counter, slid my cleaning list under a magnet shaped like a lighthouse, and drove to Water Street. Ruthie's hug smelled like cinnamon and fairy diesel. We sat by the window at the Salty Gull, pressed our palms around hot mugs, and made the kind of eye contact that feels like a bridge being put back together. Halfway through her story about her youngest getting into a college in Vermont, my phone buzzed with Kaylee's name. I smiled. "Already done?" I answered, and heard breathing, the kind that has to choose each inhale. "Miss Bennett?" she whispered, so thin I had to lean into the receiver. Is anyone else supposed to be in the house? No, I said, and inside me, the pencil of the day snapped. Why? There's a woman upstairs. The cafe's clatter fell away. Kaylee, go outside, I said, steadying my voice with both hands. Take your phone, lock the door, wait on the porch. I'm calling the police. I'm outside now, she whispered. I'm on the steps.
It took me 6 minutes to reach the house, but time did strange things, stretched when the light turned red, snapped back when I turned onto our street and saw a police cruiser already idling at the curb. Kaylee was on the top step, arms around her bag like it was the last warm thing in the world. Her brown hair clung in damp strands to her cheeks. Are you hurt? I asked, pulling her into a hug before she can answer. She shook her head. I was polishing the banister. I looked up and saw a woman step from the hall into the last room. She had long hair and a white dress, like an old nightgown. I thought maybe you came home, but the front door was still bolted from the inside. Miss Bennett, she looked over her shoulder at me. It's okay, I told her, though nothing felt okay. You did the right thing. 2 officers, one older with the kind of eyes that have seen everything twice, and a younger one who kept trying to smile kindly, asked brief questions and then moved through the house with practiced grace. They checked every room, every closet, behind the old laundry chute door, even the narrow crawl space off the pantry. They found nothing, not a footprint on the upstairs landing, not a screen moved, no mark on any lock. Sometimes light does a number on you in a house like this, the older officer said. Wind, mirrors, angles. Still, we'll make a note. You call if anything else seems off. We were still on the porch when Graham's Volvo rolled up and clicked to a stop. He stepped out handsome as a book jacket and a navy jacket and that sweater all our friends envied because they swear it makes everyone look trustworthy. He took in the cruiser, the officers, Kaylee's wide eyes, and my hands strangling themselves. What did I miss? He asked with the concerned half smile, already working on making it all manageable. I told him. He listened, nodded, turned to Kaylee with warm professor energy. You did exactly what you should have, he said. Kaylee gets spooked by this old house too. It throws shadows across the landing around 3 every afternoon. I swear there are times I think I see my grandmother with her hair in pin curls coming around that corner. Kaylee's shoulders loosened an inch. He peeled off a few extra bills, pressed them into her hand, and told her to take the rest of the day for studying. He shook the officers' hands, thanked them, and promised we'd call if we saw anything else. No arrogance, just the kind of confidence that makes people tuck their doubts into their coat pockets, because surely a man like that must know what houses do. After they left, the quiet expanded like a sail catching wind. Graham put the kettle on, always his gesture of peace, and reached for the mugs we save for guests. Love, a scare, and no intruder? Let's sit. Tea solves more than it is credited for. I saw a woman, I said. And I believe you saw something, he replied, steady as a peer. Light can be cruel. I'll check the locks tonight. I'll pick up new deadbolts at Hartley's after lunch. I wanted to be the kind of woman who listens to reason, and for an hour I was. I sat in our kitchen and let him rinse the cups and watch steam rise like prayers, and told myself it was an old house, built of timber that remembers storms. Still, somewhere under everything, a small thread pulled tight, and nothing I set down afterward stayed where I put it. 3 months later, I retired from the high school. On my last day, the students lined my doorway, and one by one, they told me where they were going: apprenticeships, gap years, a culinary program in Tacoma. And I cried quietly, because when you work with kids for 3 decades, you learn to cry like a woman who knows where the tissues are without looking. Retirement is a brand new room, and you have to learn where the light switches are. The first week, I slept late and then found that sleeping late felt like skipping a class I was still enrolled in. I baked an orange loaf and burned it. I sharpened pencils I had no use for. I made another list. That was when I began to notice the noises. At first, I told myself it was the roof settling. Then a chair scraped above the library, slow and definitive, the way you move a chair when you're not bothering to hide the sound. Another night, there was the whisper of paper turning. I brought it up at breakfast, tried to make a joke of it. "It sounds like we have a polite ghost," I said, "one who reads." "Or a squirrel with literary taste," Graham said. And that afternoon, he came home with 3 heavy traps and set them near the attic hatch. "I'll deal with it," he promised. For a few nights, the house went quiet. The quiet should have felt like reassurance. Instead, it felt like a trick a magician pulls when he wants you to look at his left hand. Other things began to go wrong in the softest possible way. I bought a coil of chorizo from the co-op, my indulgence, the kind that makes the kitchen smell like a country I have not yet visited. Graham cannot eat spicy food. He's the man who sneezes if I twist a pepper grinder with enthusiasm, so I felt smug about my selfish purchase. I cut 2 slices, wrapped the rest, and tucked it behind the yogurt where household treaties say no one will touch it. In the morning, half of it was gone. Not a clean cut, a hurried wedge. I asked gently, because that's what you do when you don't want the answer to feel like a fight. "Did you try the sausage?" He didn't look up from the book review section. "I did," he said breezy. "Felt bold. I know I'll pay for it, but it was interesting." 2 days later, the other half was gone. There was an odd kindness to the theft. The paper rewrapped carefully, the refrigerator closed without a slam, as if someone had learned to live quietly. I thought of Kaylee's voice on the phone. "There's a woman upstairs." Then came the puddle in the upstairs bathroom, clear water beating on tile, a mirror still fogged, a towel damp as if used a minute ago. It was a Saturday. We'd been in Tacoma all day for a friend's birthday. "Lee," Graham said, cheerful in the way people are cheerful when it is the one thing they can control. "I'll call Hartley's and get the plumber's card." He didn't, and the floor never flooded again. I'd open a kitchen cabinet and find a plate that had been put away warm and perfectly clean, but I couldn't remember washing it. I'd wake at 2 a.m. and put my palm on Graham's side of the bed and feel the cool of sheets that had not been touched since midnight. Sometimes I thought I could hear the attic latch whisper into place the way people say their names when they answer a roll call. I cleaned his study one afternoon and tugged at a desk drawer that had stuck for years. It opened as easily as if someone had oiled it last week. Inside was a small, dark notebook with a leather cover worn smooth by someone's thumb and a string tied around it in a simple bow. Graham hates writing by hand. His notebooks, on the rare occasions he buys them, stay pristine out of principle. This one's edges were softened by use. I untied the string because I have been a counselor too long to obey every boundary a man puts in a room. The first page was covered in the looping hand of a woman. There were fragments, sketches that hummed with life, a scene at a bus stop in a town with only one bus, a letter from an old woman to her future self. a description of rain that made me want to open the window and hold my tongue out to taste it. The voice was unmistakable. It was the voice that had made our town line up around the block to buy my husband's books on driftwood tables outside the bookstore. I slid the notebook back into the drawer and shut it, hard enough for the wood to complain, and then I spent the rest of the day putting a room back together I had not meant to take apart. Around then, Mr. Harrow, Graham's editor, called twice in one day, and when Graham didn't pick up, he rang our bell. He arrived with a folder under his arm and a frown he tried to keep gentlemanly. "This isn't like him," he told me in the foyer where the light is kind even to men who are about to say something unkind. "He misses a deadline by a week, not a quarter. His neighbor across the street says your attic light burns like a lighthouse until well past midnight." He offered the information as evidence or maybe as a kindness. If he's stuck, we can help, but silence is the worst thing for a book that needs a spine. I repeated what Graham had told me. "He's away on Lopez, off the grid, needs quiet." The assistant, who stood behind Harrow like a slender shadow, said softly, "Miss Bennett, if there's anything we should know—" "There isn't," I said, because what else could I say when I did not trust my own house anymore? That afternoon, I went to the garden shed and dragged out the folding ladder, the one that smells like old rope in winter. I hauled it up the back stairs, rested it against the ceiling under the hatch at the end of the hall, and stared at the small brass latch Graham always called fussy. It wasn't fussy. It opened with a shy click, like a secret that had waited long enough. Cold attic air exhaled into the hall, a blend of paper and old wood and a sweetness I could not place. I climbed. The rungs creaked, a strange comfort because creaks tell the truth. I pushed the hatch all the way open and lifted my head into a room with low rafters and orphan furniture draped in sheets. Dust motes turned in the lamplight like a universe inventing itself. There was a table. There was a chair. There were 3 neatly folded blankets, a glass of water, 2 books, a stack of spiral notebooks, a small fan, a tin of tea, a plate, and a knife. And there was a woman at the table, writing. "Hello?" I said, because sometimes all you have when you step into the true story is your manners. The pencil stopped. She turned. Her hair was long and dark, threaded with silver, her face thinner than I remembered, her eyes the clear lake color my mother passed along to both of us. I knew her before she said a single word. "You carry your sister around inside your chest even when the world tells you she is gone." "Nora," she said, and it was both a question and the answer to 20 long years. "Sister!" The attic floor rose and fell under my feet like a dock in a wake. We stood, we stared. We crossed the space in small steps, and then we were holding each other, and I was crying into the familiar hollow where her neck meets her shoulder, and she was shaking, and in the middle of all that, the strangest thought darted by. She's warm. She's not a ghost. She's warm. I helped her down the ladder. She moved like someone whose body has been trained to be small. In the living room, I wrapped her in a blanket and made tea with the good honey, the honey we save for colds and holidays. She cupped the mug, breathed in steam, and let it warm the hollow between her hands. For a long time, neither of us spoke because when the deepest thing finally breaks the surface, you don't rush it. Lena began slowly, as if turning a key in a long unused lock. She said, "I wanted to tell you, but he always said if I did, it would ruin you." "Who?" I asked, even though my heart, which had been holding its breath for years, already knew. "Graham," she said. I did not scream or pound the table. I think my training with teenagers saved me. You learn to let facts lay themselves down. How long have you been here? I asked. Not always here, she said quickly. Not every day. It started as hiding, then as waiting, then as making sure you didn't have to wear the weight of what I'd done. One day turned into a year in the way tides make their way up the shore. Tell me everything, I said. And she did.
Back when she was 22 and learning the precise weight of her own talent, a magazine editor from Seattle told her he could make introductions and coax doors to open. She believed him because girls with good sentences want to believe in men who praise them. Then one evening, in an office after hours, he shut the door and tried to change the terms. She pulled away. He grabbed her wrist. She shoved him and he slipped and struck his head on the edge of a side table. He did not stop breathing. He sat up and swore he would ruin her. She ran. She called Graham because I was out of town on a school trip. He told her to meet him, said not to call anyone, told her that powerful men weather storms and that if she told the truth now, the truth would be spun by a person who had already chosen to misuse his power. Wait, he said. Give it a week. He put her in the attic for a night and brought her sandwiches and a blanket and a crossword puzzle book from the drugstore. For Noor, he said, I'm protecting her. The week did not end. The man did not ruin her. The rumor of a scandal simply faded. The old editor left the city. He sent a letter threatening a suit and then never filed one. Nothing happened in the papers. Everything happened in our house. I wanted to go, Lena said. I told him I would tell the truth. I tried twice to pack a small bag. She looked down at her hands, then up again. He said you would lose your job. He said people would call you the wife who hid a sister. He said a town like this would never let you grocery shop in peace. He made your peace the lock. Whenever I was home, Graham insisted the attic hatch stay latched. Whenever I was out, he let Lena down with the list. Shower quickly, eat from the back of the refrigerator, put every plate back dry. He told her it would be only for a season. She believed him because she wanted to believe in the man who loved her sister. I kept writing, she said. And when she said it, the whole room changed shape. Because her voice, when she talked about writing, is the voice of a woman stepping into daylight. If I didn't, I felt like the inside of my head would fill with bees. I wrote in pencil because I liked the scrape. He found a pile one day and said, Lena, this is why you're here. Not to hide, but to make something that matters. Let me take this out into the world for you until it's safe to be seen. He swore he would put my name on the work later. He said later so often it began to sound like love. Later, as it turns out, has an expiration date. I called a lawyer I trust named Lark Hughes. I have sat in many meetings with families that needed both compassion and a spine, and you learn who can bring both. She came, sat on the edge of my sofa, listened without interrupting, and then said the most stabilizing sentence a person can hear in a storm. Here is what we will do. We photographed the attic just as we found it. We gathered notebooks and drafts. Lena annotated margins with dates and memories, what song was on the radio when she wrote a scene, what kind of tea she had, what the gulls were doing out the little window. Lark called Mr. Harrell and asked him to come alone. He stood in our attic and read a page and then another,
And then his face changed the way a shoreline changes under a tide. "I have edited this voice for years," he said quietly. "I'm ashamed I never asked why your husband's drafts were handwritten in a woman's script." "Help us fix it," Lark said. He did. He carried boxes down our stairs with the humility of a man who didn't have room in his hands for pride. He reached out to his legal team and to the publisher's ethics council and said, "We will do this right, and we will not make a circus of it." Graham came home 3 evenings later. He opened the door, dropped his overnight bag, saw Lark sitting in our living room with a notebook on her knees and my sister beside me in a gray sweater, and he stopped in the exact place a man stops when he realizes the room has rearranged itself without his permission. "Nora," he said, like a prayer he had memorized. "Nora, Lena."
I wanted to rage. Instead, I let Lark do what we had asked her here to do. She explained the charges calmly: coercion, unlawful confinement, misappropriation, fraud. She explained exactly what would happen next and when and where he should be the next morning and what he must not do in the meantime. He opened his mouth to reach for the story he had used for years, for Nora, for love, for safety, and I put up my hand and said the only thing I needed to say to him in that moment: "You don't get to say my name and call it a key anymore." He left, and the air in the house felt different, less heavy, as if the walls had set down something they were tired of holding. What followed did not look like a movie. No chase scenes, no shouting on the lawn. There were appointments and statements, a careful cataloging of drafts, a publisher's audit that resulted in amended contracts replacing a famous name with the one that belonged there from the first page. There were meetings in which people who had benefited from the old story apologized without excuses and then did the work of making amends. There was a district attorney who understood that harm can happen in a house without a bruise. There was a settlement that would let a woman who had been made small stand comfortably for the rest of her life. Healing did not look like a sunrise either. It looked like small human things. The first morning, Lena chose her own tea in the co-op aisle, cried between peppermint and chamomile, and then laughed at herself in aisle 3. The first time she sat on the porch at dusk and did not flinch when a neighbor waved from across the street. The first time she walked downtown and the clerk in the bookstore said, very softly, "Welcome," and meant it without curiosity attached. The first time she sat with a smartphone in her hands, learning with the sincerity of a child, texting me from the other side of the couch on purpose, "Hello," from 2 feet away. She started seeing a counselor who helped her untwist the sentences in her head that had kept her loyal to her own cage. We went for walks along the bluff where the wind tries to steal your hat and the water below is a slick of light. Sometimes she stopped to touch the bark of a cedar tree like it was a page she had dreamed of reading. I will tell you what it felt like the day we walked past the bookstore and saw the tall, new poster in the window. The cover had changed only a little, the title was the same, the art still showed a house with 4 lit windows and a woman by the sea. Beneath it, in letters that were inarguable and clean, it said, "By Lena Bennett." We went in. The bell made its small sound. No one made a spectacle.
The clerk set a stack of new editions on a table that still smelled like stain and asked if she might have one signed. Lena wrote carefully on the title page, in the looping hand I used to copy in middle school. "Thank you for seeing me," she wrote, and dated it. We didn't buy the newspaper when they covered the legal side. It was accurate and plain and kind because Lark had asked everyone involved to choose care over gossip. There were no sensational photos, no heavy words. Just a column of facts and a photograph of a cover with a name corrected. That was enough. As for Graham, the law spoke in the quiet tones it uses when it wants to be sure everyone hears every word. He entered a plea, agreed to a sentence that included time away and restitution and a ban on profiting from the books he had claimed. There were volunteer hours, a public apology, and a requirement to fund a scholarship for young writers whose voices are too often borrowed by people with louder microphones. It did not feel triumphant. It felt like a door closing that should have been shut long ago. We turned the attic into something else. We scrubbed the rafters with vinegar and opened the small window so the sea air could move around the space. We left the table where it was and added a second chair and a rug the color of tide pools. We lined the walls with shelves and put copies of Lena's books in order, not to worship them, but to give them a home in the very space they were born in. The old trap Graham had set for squirrels we set at the curb with a sign, "Free to anyone catching what does not belong to them." Neighbors learned bit by bit. Some came by with casseroles that made us laugh because grief and joy both bring food in this town. Mr. Hamilton, the neighbor with the telescope who had noticed the attic light, left a note on our porch that said, "I'm sorry I did not knock sooner. If you ever need a man to stare at a house at night for a good reason, I'm your man." We waved to him from the porch, like forgiving is a thing your hand can do before your heart catches up. Kaylee came over with a bouquet of wildflowers wrapped in brown paper. "I didn't imagine her," she said, a little smile alive at the corners of her mouth. "No," I said, and handed her a signed copy of the new edition with a note from Lena. "For the girl who called the truth by its name." Sometimes people ask me, usually online, sometimes on a bench by the marina, why Lena didn't run sooner, why she didn't slip down the stairs and bang on my bedroom door. I have learned that the answer doesn't fit in one sentence. Fear isn't a straight line. It's a web. When someone you trust tells you that your silence keeps your sister safe, you learn to live inside a small circle and call it duty. You make tea quietly. You pad your steps. You set plates back into cupboards so gently it sounds like a blessing. And then one day, your sister climbs a ladder and the circle opens and you step out. We went once to the old office building in Seattle where the editor had worked. It's now a co-working space with plants and kombucha and people in headphones. We stood in the lobby. Lena breathed in and out, then said, "I don't want this place. It doesn't get to be a chapter." We turned and went to Pike Place and bought peach hand pies and watched a busker sing a love song to a terrier. Sometimes closure is saying, "No thank you," to a door a younger you once pressed her ear against.
The night before the first reading under her own name, Lena stood in the hallway by the mirror and touched the top of her hair the way she used to when we were girls who practiced for school pictures. "What if my voice shakes?" she asked. "Then it will match mine," I said. "We'll make a duet of it." We did. The room filled with people who brought their inside voices and their open faces. She read the passage about the woman listening to rain, a piece Graham had once read on a stage while people dabbed their eyes with cocktail napkins. And the town took a collective breath, like hearing a song sung by the person who wrote it. She finished, and for a moment, no one clapped. We just sat there, full of something that was not triumph, and not pity, and not shock. It was relief, for her, for us, for the truth, which is a better applause than hands can make. If you have stayed with me this far, thank you. I know this is a lot of words, but some stories need room to stretch. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Let me know if a house has ever tried to tell you something and you finally heard it. If this story spoke to you, tap like, subscribe for more, and, only if you feel like it, use super thanks to help us keep telling careful, human stories that choose compassion over noise. One last thing, a note from my porch to yours. Listen when a small unease tugs at you. Check locks, yes, but also check the stories that are being told around your life. Check who benefits when you decide to be quiet. Love that requires your silence is not love. It is a lock wearing a friendly face. Real love opens doors and finds you in the attic and says, "Come downstairs. It's time." On your screen now are 2 more stories I think you'll enjoy. True, steady pieces of life that bend toward light. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next story, with gratitude and with respect.